Wonderful. So welcome everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to our event this evening with Dr. Parul in conversation about her experience losing her brother to oral cancer and the book that she compiled from his diary entries called Life Interrupted, Dr. Dua's Survival Guide. You can see the nice copy of her book behind her in the screen there. So my name's Emma. For anyone who hasn't met me, I'm the community manager at Untangle. If you're new to Untangle, we help people, anyone who's lost a loved one, rebuild their life after a loss, be providing practical and emotional support all in one place. So really lucky to have Dr. Pearl with us this evening. So she's a dentist in Long Island, New York. She lives there with her husband and her two sons. She really sadly had a sort of big life change last year when she lost her only and younger sibling to oral cancer. He was also a dentist, and since his death, she's devoted her time to educating doctors and patients alike about risk factors, prevention, and advocating for early diagnosis of oral cancer. So tonight we'll talk about her experience losing her brother during the pandemic, what she's learned from her loss, and kind of what inspired her to write a book or produce a book using her brother's diary entries. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A and there'll be time to ask questions at the end as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Pearl. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me, Emma. It's great.
Thank you very much for being here. Firstly, we sort of love to hear a bit more about your story, kind of about your brother, and what the book is kind of about.
Sure. So he was my younger and only sibling, almost 8 years apart. So I've watched him come home from the hospital, take his few steps, changed his diapers. And Manu followed my footsteps and became a dentist as well. And he was diagnosed with cancer in 2019. And he had a major surgery, an 8-hour surgery where half his tongue was resected and graft placed, and he recovered spectacularly. And he resided in Canada, in Calgary, and he actually came and visited me the following month in September of 2019. And he was back to seeing patients following in October, but unfortunately the cancer is so aggressive, and he was young. He was barely 32 at the time of diagnosis, and the cancer returned with a vengeance in 2020, and that's when COVID hit and the world, we all know, experienced the shutdowns, lockdowns. I couldn't come in, and it just took a toll. Once he got chemo radiation at the summer of 2020 during his 34th birthday, and the cancer was metastatic down to his pelvic bone. It started from the tongue and it just spread everywhere. And it was a matter of time at that point. So in December of 2020, I actually got a compassion release from the government of Canada so I could come and physically visit him because of the border shutdown. I wasn't vaccinated. We had all of these COVID scares and him being immunocompromised. It was a very challenging time for all of us. And, navigating through grief, not only with a diagnosis that is terminal for a young sibling, and and this is not the thought process. This is not how life is supposed to go through. So navigating through that with COVID, with shutdowns, with all the other challenges that we have is a tough process. And aggressive cancer just progressed, and he was in and out of the hospital quite a bit. And unfortunately, I was meant to come in March of 2021 to visit him after his next round of chemo radiation. But a week prior to me traveling, I got a call that he was going into the hospital. It was very random. It was on the 12th of March. My mom said, he's going in, don't call him. He's going to be sedated. He's got trouble breathing because he had chest effusion. So he had a chest port placed in where there was fluid drained from. And they said, don't call him. And then the next day, I was told he's moved to hospice. And in the evening, they told me, if you can get here by any means possible, come here, because it's a matter of a day or two. He's not going to make it the week. I was supposed to be coming on the 20th. So literally it's 6 days. And I had my compassion release, which is I'm sure Europe had this too. And it's only valid for a month, but I had all my paperwork. I just didn't have a PCR. And even I got that expedited. I had a flight booked for the 15th. However, he passed away on March 14th. And as his body was going under organ shutdown, and I was asked to say my goodbyes to him on a video call just like this. And I told him, you don't need to suffer anymore. Let go. It's okay to move on. And I'll see you when I see you. Don't wait for me. I'll make it if I can. So, and unfortunately, he passed just the day before my landing. And I knew I knew on the flight um, that I was going to plan a funeral at this point. He took his last breaths. I saw his dead body on video call like this. And then I planned the funeral when I got into Calgary. And when I had gone and seen him in December, he had expressed himself that he wanted to talk about what his experience in life has been through this blogs that he had been writing, because he was going through cancer at the worst possible time. With going through chemo radiation without anybody with you, he was in total isolation at times at the hospital, no visits allowed, friends couldn't come over. I wasn't allowed to come, not family support wasn't there. So he started getting an outlet, and that was his work, his writings. And so when he passed, I walked into his house, and I saw some writings he had published in a magazine, a dental magazine, that spread like wildfire because of the situation, being a dentist and oral cancer. And so I took all his writings and made it into a book. That was his last wish when we had spoken. And I had been working with a publisher prior while he was still alive. And he said, I have time. I don't want to publish this book right now. I got more to write. And I said, okay, take your time. And once he left, this was all I could do for him. I couldn't be there to help him with cancer. I couldn't be there to help my parents with it. But I could get this book out into the world. So that's how this book came around in the story.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously such a sad story, and yeah, we're so sorry for your loss. And it's lovely that you're sort of able to, honor him and the work that he was starting to do by publishing the book. So how did you find that process of publishing the book? Did it help you perhaps process your grief? Like, how did you kind of find that process?
Definitely, because I was writing his story on his laptop using his words, right? I found all his writings on his laptop. And then the epilogue that I wrote is his life story with pictures of him. And it just helped me kind of complete the circle, so to speak. Like, life doesn't go as planned. And this was a role reversal. It should have been the other way around, especially him being almost 8 years junior to me. And it was a grieving process. It was letting go. It was, finishing his story that he started. And I mentioned that at the end of the book, that this was his journey. I'm just helping him facilitate it. His job, his battle, it's all been done. He's worked hard. He's done. And I'm just finishing the rest of it. So yes, it was very therapeutic.
Definitely. So what was your brother like? And what was your relationship with him like?
Oh, Manu was happy-go-lucky guy. He was always smiling. He was very frank, and he would tell you like it is. He never sugarcoated anything. I mean, if it was bad, he'd tell you it's bad. If it's good, it'll tell you it's good. There was no gray. It was black or white. And a relationship, he was almost 8 years my junior, so I was like a second mom to him. But I was also the buffer in between the parents. He looked up to me in certain aspects, and then I started looking up to him as he started his own practice and did very well in it. He wasn't married, didn't have any children, but we lived apart a lot of our lives, because I moved to the States when he was 17. Well, first I moved when I was 17. He was barely 10. I was in college. And when I moved back to Canada, and I got married back to the States. So we spent a lot of our lives apart. However, dentistry kind of glued us together, and we shared cases. We would travel and take courses together. So we were, I would always say, like, he would tell me first, even like the cancer diagnosis, he's like, Didi, which means older sibling, older sister. And he's like, I have cancer. I wanted to tell you first. I'm going to tell mom and dad another day or so. Just, I was always the buffer and take it. But yeah, no, we had a great relationship, and I'm just honored that he thought that I would help finish. He told me his last
Mm.
request. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. So when you learned that his cancer was terminal, how did you cope with that? And did your relationship with him change at all after that?
So, as I mentioned, he was in the hospital, and I think he was in the hospital for 2 weeks in January of 2020. And I had people who had been through this process, and I had friends who had seen his results, his CAT scans and PET scans, and they said he doesn't have time. And I would tell them, no, no, he's going to fight this through. And they said, no, he's got a matter of months now. And so in January, he was admitted for 2 weeks in isolation because of COVID. And my parents couldn't get, there was, privacy issues. But I did have a doctor friend of mine visit and take a look at the charts, and he gave me a diagnosis. And I still remember that day, January 17th. I was at tennis lessons with my kid. It was a Sunday. And I got the report of not his actual doctors, but a friend of mine who looked at the scans and said to me, you need to discuss end of life wishes. And it was the hardest email I have ever read. I could not go through it. There were 14 points. I had my husband read through it. I was a lot of crying and tears because this was now in paper, all these times it's not in your face. And now I had it that it's a matter of time. And I said, this can't be true. And it was very hard to accept it. When I found that he didn't have much time, I actually wrote Manu a letter and an email, and I said how much he meant to me and how I've watched him grow up. And it was my goodbye letter to him. And death was this unspoken thing, and it was this big elephant in the room. We didn't talk about it. We didn't discuss about it. We knew what the outcome was. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but it was very, very soon, and time wasn't on our hands. So I told him, and he read that letter, and he said, I don't know how to respond to this. And I said, he's like, it's the sweetest thing anybody has ever done for me. And I said, you don't have to respond. I want you to know what you meant to me. And that's the end. And then we never discussed it. And I never discussed it with my parents because I was sitting in New York. They were there. They were living, breathing, watching him die in front of him, in front of them. They were watching him slowly disintegrate and lose his ability to even talk, speak, walk. And he was so vibrant, played sports. He played rugby provincially, and he played golf, he kayaked, he did all these things, and now he could barely walk. So they knew death was imminent. I just could not discuss with them anymore. I said I didn't disclose any information. I wanted them to still keep their hope up. So it was very challenging.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. And I imagine that the added difficulty of the pandemic and obviously not being able to be there. And then I guess, after he passed away, grieving separately, your parents somewhere else, that must have been really, really hard as well.
Very hard in our own bubbles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Did you manage to find any sort of inventive ways to stay connected, or was it just a lot of sort of Zoom calls like this and things?
Connected with Manu?
Yes, yeah, and your family and your friends up while you were grieving as well.
We did a lot of connections. While he was still in the hospital, we did a magic show one of his friends organized. All the friends would get together on Zoom and do it. And then I made him a video collage with handwritten messages and the song, This Is My Fight Song. And so that was playing in the background, and friends had these cheer messages, and it was just this video to help cheer him up. So we did little things like that, whatever we could, being very inventive with the situation. What else did we do? At the funeral, there were only 10 people allowed, so it was very tough. And with COVID restrictions, it was hard to do a funeral. And but we did a celebration of life in December, the year that he passed, last December. So we had all the friends come up. I sang the song Memories by, oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Maroon 5. And had the audience come sing along with me. The words were very accurate. So we did that. People shared stories,
Mm.
and because we couldn't have the funeral, so this was our way to say goodbye to him. And then I also created a podcast of the same name, Life Interrupted, Dr. Do a Survival Guide on Spotify and iTunes. And I sat down with like his closest friends, his inner circle, some who were there for him at the last days. And we just talked about the book and him, and that was like my way to share my grief with somebody who knew him very well. Especially I wasn't there for the day-to-day stuff, and they're all doctors and dentists, and in Calgary, and they were very close to him. And that was that unexpressed love, that that missing piece, it kind of filling in the blanks for me, like that, you talk differently than your friends than you do to your siblings and your parents. You
Mm.
express different things. And somebody said like, oh, he was so scared, or he just didn't want this to be, that's why there was a late diagnosis, and he didn't go for this thing because he was just scared. And so there are these missing pieces that I didn't know, and it helped me understand him a little bit better. What you don't know when you're in your 30s, you feel like, and he was a dentist with his own practice, and which was thriving. And the death is kind of like, yes, it's ever present, but that's the last thing in your mind, that you're given a timeline, and this is it, this is the end of the journey, this is the buck stops here. And so he tried to do the best he could with whatever little time that he had. So yeah, that's how we expressed. We got together, and I was in Calgary last month, and I got together again with his friends, and we just share stories and laughs and hugs, and he still joins us. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So sort of been about a year and a half kind of since you lost him. Where are you kind of at with your grief now? And how are you
Mm,
feeling on day-to-day basis?
it's been very isolating because
Mm.
I'm away from my family. My parents don't live near me. I don't have any other siblings to share. I don't have I lost both my grandparents in the same year of Manu. So Manu's second cancer diagnosis came in April of 2020. I lost my maternal grandmother. I lost my maternal grandfather 3 months after Manu. Um, and I've already lost my other set of grandparents, and one was also to cancer, which is very painful and hard. So my parents are grieving their own griefs of losing parents as well as their child. So it's very challenging. And my grief, like I feel like sibling grief is a very unique loss,
Mm.
because my parents still have another child. They have me, they have grandkids. I don't have anyone. I don't have my parents. I don't have, I mean, I do have my parents, but I don't have another sibling, and when I was planning Manu's funeral, and I was sitting at the funeral table, and long table, we're sitting with all this paperwork and decisions to make. And my dad didn't make it to that. It was just me and my mom. And I picked out the casket, picked out his suit and tie and clothes he's going to wear. And all I could think of is, I have to do this 2 more times for each one of my parents. And I'll have to sit on this table by myself. I won't have Manu. I won't have somebody to share, the little silly stories of your parents, of your life, of your upbringing. I have no one. And even in New York, like my husband, we've been married for 16 years, but because of the distance, my husband would see Manu in sporadics, and so did my children. My children are young, that they don't remember their uncle as much. It wasn't a daily occurrence like, oh, you're coming over for dinner. No, they saw him a couple of times a year. So they don't experience that loss as much as I do. And,
Mm.
and nobody else has gone through it. So they don't know how to help me or be a part of my grieving process. So it's been very isolating. And there are lots of time I've broken down. A certain, even social situations will be tough, like watching somebody young like him getting married, like things, or my friends becoming, uncles and aunts. And I'm like, these are the things I was entitled to. I was entitled to be an aunt. I was entitled to plan another wedding. I was entitled to having my kids have cousins. My kids will never have cousins. Like, these were things that I wasn't an only child growing up. I had somebody to share my life with and who knew the path I have traveled and who understood my parents. And now I don't have that. And that grief is very, very isolating. And so it's taken me a lot of time, a lot of grieving, counseling, therapy. I do have a therapist who navigates through it. And realizing also, like, my loss, when you lose somebody or something close to you happens, it's your world that gets shattered. The other person necessarily doesn't understand if they haven't gone through it. For them, they'll say a few words of condolences and life goes on for them. For you, the
Mm.
life has stopped and you're just like, oh, world, just stop for 5 minutes so I can breathe and process what's happened. But life goes on, and it's been very hard, extremely hard. And through my writings, through the book, through meeting people, and like we're sitting across the globe, and it's just a way to also let go and find people with the same scenarios or the same challenges, and that's kind of united, and I've built beautiful friendships with people that
Mhm.
I've never met otherwise. I would have never met otherwise. And so yeah, it's a process. Grief is a process. There's no timeline on it. It's some days it'll be a-okay, and then some days a song will trigger a memory, and that will just be like waterworks, and it's hard. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
no, not at all. Yeah, I think you made so many true and important points there. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that sibling grief is, it's quite a unique form of grief. We definitely found, from our community members, that a lot of people who've lost their sibling kind of feel like sort of society sees it as like a sort of almost a secondary loss, and they perhaps have to be like the strong one to support their family, or their parents. Like, can you kind of relate to that at all, that sort of
Oh,
feeling? Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, and I've had other friends of mine who've lost their siblings at younger ages, but one of them is their family of five. They're five brothers and sisters, so they lost one, so they have four others, and the other person who lost her only sibling, but her sibling who passed away had two kids. So, and I'm like, you have two nephews that, they're little snippets of your brother there, and you'll always have him, and a part of him is still alive, so to speak. And I have nothing. I have this book. That's it. And those are his words. And that's all I hold on to. So it is, you're meant to, and everybody looks up to you like, oh yeah, you did all this, you're the strong one. But there's these, and my husband's picked me up, like literally I'm broken down on the floor, um, in a fetal position, like just unable to console. Or like I said, I was at a recent wedding. I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't even watch this wedding ceremony because I'm like, these are the joys that I was entitled to, and that's been stolen. Um, and it's just, it's hard. It's hard to be strong all the time.
Mm.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, so going back to the book, is there kind of any, like, one thing that you'd want people to take away from reading it?
Sure. So Manu was a fighter. I mean, he fought, I think through his entire life. He came to Canada when he was really young. We lived in different countries around the globe. Um, and so we were always the new kids. So we were all very, in a sense, my parents migrated from India and they went to Abu Dhabi, and then they went to Canada, and I moved to the US and Canada. So we've been, always the new kid on the block, both of us. So we're very resilient and strong. And I think that's what the book goes into. He knew his prognosis. He knew death was around the corner. He knew, and what he writes about, if you read it, it's almost like he's reached this state of nirvana, this enlightenment that he talks about. And he's like, I know tomorrow's not promised to anybody. And so we should live our lives to the fullest, doing the things we want to do, and the things that bring us joy. You know, if we're chasing after trophies, who are we chasing them for? Are we really chasing them for ourselves? Never losing hope, and doing something good for the humankind. He talks about his own failures, whether it was professionally or financially, or even in cancer, you know, health wise, and learning to accept those failures and realizing that these are all things that will make us stronger, and learning lessons, and not to take a failure to heart, but learn from those mistakes and do better decisions. And he had his beautiful dog, and he talks about you know, how pure puppy love was, and it was just pure joy. And um, you know, and he's like, humans cannot sometimes give that love that animals give, and you know, with no expectations. And he just talks about new beginnings, how we can endure what our mind, you know, if we focus on something, we can really get through the life's challenges. And it's learning to live your best life possible, really, and never ever losing hope, and that there's still hope. And I'm happy to quote something on that from the book, if yeah.
Yeah, of
Eh,
course. Yeah, lovely.
So I'd love to quote two things. One is he talks about hope in the beginning. Uh, Hope is one of the most beautiful things in life. We often don't appreciate its beauty until we are placed in ugly, difficult situations where all we are left with is hope. Hope is one of the few emotions that can make us or break us. To lose hope in life is to lose the meaning of life, for it is the spiritual fuel that guides us in this difficult world. So he knew his challenges, his diagnosis, and I'd love to read the last part. And this is kind of when he wrote this last blog, and it's based on new beginnings. And he wrote it when he was in isolation in January. And I knew Manu had come to, you know, acceptance of his, he had no anger with what life had dealt him with. He knew he was going to die. He knew time was limited, and he was okay with that. He had made peace with his fate. And so in the last, and this is his last passage he ever wrote, and it just struck a chord with me because of what he had written. And I quote him: "One of the most important things that I have learned during these turbulent and difficult times is to accept the loss of control and continue to ride the wave day by day. The ability to focus and get through each day is imperative, whether your world collapses around you. I write this as I am in a hospital bed with one lung almost collapsed from fluid, and to be perfectly honest, I have found my peace. I understand that every day is a new journey, and I focus on getting through the days, enjoying little victories, and having complete faith that the future will unfold as it should. And my worries and anxieties are normal but fruitless, and will not help me define a new path in life. What is imperative is inner peace, strength, and truly believing that there will be a better life in this world or the next." End quote. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's such
yeah,
a lovely, lovely passage.
yeah. So he knew it was coming, and he just never lost hope on it. And he still kept holding on to hope, whether now or another life. We don't know what lies after death. He's out there.
It's lovely, thank you. And finally, do you have any plans to kind of write any future books, or is kind of was this kind of, you know, everything that you needed to say and he needed to say, do you think?
Um, I don't know. I've been asked to, and I haven't quite grasped my mind around it, because it's, you know,
Mhm.
it's a difficult journey that I went through, and I
Yeah.
chronicle a little bit about it. Um, what I have, and I will share this with your audience, is that a way also to grieve, besides this book, was completing the things that he was unable to do that we had planned. Like, we had planned a vacation to Hawaii, and that never happened because of COVID and cancer. So I took that trip, and you know, I completed the book. I took the trip that he had planned. Um, you know, these little things that he had wanted to do. We've been checking off those items in the book. He wanted to speak at a conference that I'm speaking on behalf of him. So, and it's just a way to kind of wind up his life and kind of give him the last, like, yes, you're still doing your work through me, but, and it's a way of grieving it.
Yeah, 100%. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Has anyone got any questions for Dr. Parul, or anything they'd like to share about their own loss or anything? Feel free to sort of, speak out, or type in the chat and I can field the questions, however you prefer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for your little talk, your presentation. That was great. Yeah, no, I think I just want to say thank you. And just it's so, I think so many of us, when we lost a sibling, I just lost my sister in May, and it was pancreatic cancer. She was 51, and it was 5 weeks from diagnosis to,
Oh my God.
to the end. Brutal. Like, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but yeah, anyways, just so many similarities, right? Where you're just like, I'm the only one left. I still have my mom. It's terrifying to think about that one day, yeah, I'm gonna have to do all the things that need to get done when your parent passes away, and it's on me. I have my husband, I have my, my brother-in-law and stuff, but it's not the same, right? It's
not the same.
Your parent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, I don't even know. Yeah, I think I'm definitely still struggling and just trying to figure out I don't know, like what to do with it. You know what I mean? Like what to do with the grief, how to turn it into something worthwhile. You know what I mean? So that she doesn't, not that she would get forgotten, but just, I don't even know how to express myself. It's just, there's so many similarities to what you said. And, like you said, you don't have a niece and nephew, although I have my niece and nephew who are in their early 20s, and thank God, because they're a direct link to Sabrina. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what we do. I don't know. It's so scary to think about moving forward without her.
It is. And it hurts when I still haven't deleted my brother's phone number. It's still there. And sometimes I call it and it says, boy, this number is no longer, or whatever, it's disconnected. And I'm like, but but it's those little things. But when we sold his home, I remember erasing that, and that was very hard. Erasing my grandparents' phone number, address, and my brother's address from my address book, because those were two big losses. And it was losing like the foundation with my grandparents. That was their, ancestral home that's been sold. And then so losing a past and a part of the future. It's this phenomenal. I'm so sorry for your sister's loss. It's, my grandmother passed of pancreatic cancer, and I've watched my parents. I was very young, but it is no joke. It is, do not wish anything on. It's just an ugly word, and I'm sorry, but I'm glad she didn't have to suffer. Manu suffered for a year and a half, and it was not fun, and so it's hard. And some of the things we've done, we have a tree in front of my house and a little bench, and so I go talk to it when I want to talk to him, and I talk to him all the time, knowing that he's there. And we always do a celebration for his birthday. We'll put balloons on the tree because it's a living thing, and we'll cut a cake, so he's not gone, and my kids still feel like they had somebody and that was important. So we do little things like that, celebrations. And look out for signs. I'm telling you, there are signs that the deceased sends us. You just have to feel and be open to them. There's so many times there have been things that have caught my attention, or my closest friends, or closest of his friends have found these little. So look out for them. She's listening. She's listening.
I know that. Yeah, that I believe in. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Was there anything else anyone else wanted to share or to ask at all?
I promise I'm not going to cry on camera.
And it's okay if you do, but this is the process, right? This is brief.
Yeah.
I think the other one I'm just talking about, since we're talking about cancer and stuff too, is just I'm in Canada,
Oh,
here,
whereabouts?
in Ontario.
Okay, mine was in Calgary. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
And anyways, yeah, and like you said, with the pandemic, thank God it was like kind of, it was past, you know, a little bit on the edge of it. So we were able to be there with her. Same thing. I took a caregiver leave off of work. You know, I was prepared to be off for however long I needed to help her, but it wasn't that long. But I think with cancer, it's, and when somebody's young like that, it's like you're just left feeling so like you could, like, did you do everything you could do? Like, you know, you just, there's so much guilt. And I think, and just like, yeah, did I screw something up? Did I not fight hard enough for something, especially in these COVID days, right? Where it's like there's, the care just isn't there maybe that it was a few years ago, right? Or just that, you know, not so much the care, but the, you know, it's busy. It's, you know, and there's limitations, right? Because everything's just sort of off the charts, booked up and everything in hospitals. But yeah, it just, that also just left such a, I don't know,
Is
unanswered questions and worries that, did I do enough? Didn't I do enough? Did I miss something? You know, could we have figured it out earlier? And yeah.
I have that guilt a lot because he showed me his initial lesion, especially because we're both dentists. And I remember him showing me, and I said, listen, I showed it to 5 other oral surgeons. This is not what you, it's not benign. This is something you need to get checked out. And he said, nah, I have friends here. It's being taken care of. And I visited him for the Stampede. If you're in Canada, you know, the Calgary Stampede. So I was there in July of 2019 and I saw his tongue and I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, and he's like, I'm getting it biopsied when you leave. And he told me in August. And that's when he had surgery. But there's also, I have that guilt for sure that had I been closer, I would have done things differently. I would have pushed him more. I would have been able to help my parents more. You know, they're older and they're sitting there taking him back and forth hospital. I couldn't do anything for them. And there's that, always that guilt. And also, like, you know, my mom feels that guilt too. Like I moved so far away from them because I always thought Manu would be there to take care of them. And he built a practice there. He built, you know, he went to school at UBC in Vancouver, but he came home to be close to the parents. So we took, you know, and it's these things that you take for granted and then they're taken away from you so abruptly. And you're like, now what? You know, this is not the life plan. This is not how it was meant to be. And it's hard, and it's hard watching, and I'm sure your mom, you know, watching to your parent cremate or bury your child, their child, and as a mom, you know, you know that pain, and you're watching your parent and you want to take it all the way, you want to fix it for them and you can't. And that's very, very, it's a whole different level of grief because you feel so helpless and you're like, I just want to take it away. And there's nothing you could do. So yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. But thank you so much, Dr. Parul, for sharing your story. Yeah, I can't wait to read the book personally. I'm just going to pop the link to the book in the chat there. Yeah, that's gone there. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Yeah, I hope you kind of found this inspiring, and you know, it's nice to know that we're not alone, isn't it? And that, you know, people understand, you know, how we feel. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. We're hosting
For having me
this month. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening if you're in the UK, or afternoon if you're in the US or Canada. And yeah, hope to see everyone at another Entangle event soon.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story. And thank you, Emma, for having me here. But the book's available in any bookstore. So you might have to go to .ca or .uk, you know, the Amazon local links to get it. So, but yeah, it's all there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.